In high school and university, I spent a lot of time on public transit forums. Yes, that is a thing. And something I remember being brought up again and again is how certain transit lines in certain cities are profitable. This way of looking at transit networks can be interesting, but I'd caution that I think it's a risky way of looking at the basic infrastructure that so many of us rely on. Just because a piece of information is true, it doesn't make it helpful. So let's look at transit lines and talk about why them being profitable doesn't really matter. Welcome to RM Transit, a channel about public transit as a network. The phrase about a transit line being profitable usually goes something like this. Agency X makes so much money from line Y that it actually pays for itself. I think this is interesting, of course. The line usually talked about is a subway or other rail line. And yes, obviously rail lines are powerful. I've talked about how rail is cost efficient to operate per passenger in other videos. But what do people mean when they say this line is profitable? Well, what I think they mean by this is that a given line recovers more in fare revenue than it costs to operate. And by saying this, there's almost a call to action being made about this particular line. It's as if it's being suggested that we're not looking at the line in the right way and that we should be doing something about this. For example, if our transit system didn't have all of these pesky buses, then it would clearly cost less to operate than it makes in fare revenue. So clearly, the transit agency is just operating all of these superfluous services when it has a profitable business it could be making money off of. Or there's the other side of the coin. Rail lines are profitable, thus we only need to build more rail lines. But these things make no sense. It's true that there are lots of lines out there that bring in more revenue than they cost to operate. That's even true of some bus routes and entire systems like the Hong Kong MTR, which is valuable information to be sure. But the issue is that it's very hard to draw a line around a particular service and say, this one makes money. Because with a business, you can't pretend that the profitability of a single product represents your entire business's profitability. Often the influence of one product on the market has an impact on the demand for others. For one thing, passengers often connect onto subway lines and train routes from other transit routes, often ones which are much more expensive to operate, like buses. So when you hear people talking about how the subway costs so little to operate and brings in so much in fare revenue, they may well be including the fares or parts of the fares from the buses, but not the costs. Which is kind of like if a business were to say, we have so much profit, when you don't consider the losses. And even if they aren't, without the buses losing money, dropping passengers off, most subway and train routes wouldn't make nearly as much money. Even in Hong Kong, where the entire system makes money, there are clearly outside factors influencing things. There are obviously alternative transportation methods, but they often aren't as convenient or aren't as low cost as taking transit. And of course, Hong Kong is one of the world's best cities for putting the people where the transit already is, so the need for feeder services is just dramatically diminished. And so why not just build more profitable lines? Well, typically a very busy line which absorbs tons of ridership from connecting lines is so successful because it is unique. It's pretty obvious that if your city has 100 bus routes and just one subway route, that subway route is probably going to be much better used. But if you saturate the transportation market with profitable lines, those lines will probably turn out to not be profitable for long. Rail networks cost a lot to build and to maintain, and they rely on other modes of transportation and dense land use feeding passengers into them. Indeed, even high-density housing doesn't come for free. It requires a ton of supporting infrastructure, transportation being just one form of that. The reason that some rail lines bring in more fares than they cost to operate isn't because they lie on some higher plane of existence. It's just a structural thing, a part of the network. I think the ultimate problem with this line of thinking is it causes people to undervalue services which do have a lot of value, even if it's not all value that we can easily capture or represent. Transit systems are networks. Subway lines rely on buses and other modes of transport to feed them, and sometimes those other modes of transport are only attractive because they'll get you to a fast subway line. Feeder buses and transit lines in general can't just be extricated from the lines they feed into or connect with. If the subway makes money, but the bus loses money, or if one line's in the red but another's in the green, it's a wash. And that's before we ask why one particular line should get credit for all of the passengers delivered by other services, or even the built form itself. Of course, the degree to which the fares you recover cover your costs can be a decent metric of your efficiency, but it's not really helpful beyond that. For example, if you think that a transit system being profitable means that if all government funding was cut, then things would go on just fine, well, probably not, because some of that profitability of your transit line was probably reliant on other, not profitable transit lines. At the same time, if we cut back any given transportation system enough, I'm sure we could create a profitable segment. But a single profitable route does not connect an entire city. It satisfies people who want a profitable transit line, not people who want transit that connects an entire city. It's a situation that only exists when people demand a service makes money, as opposed to taxpayers exchanging their tax dollars for services that provide dividends in terms of public mobility and all kinds of other benefits. As I talk about in my Transit Doesn't Need to Profit video, any transit line which makes money could not make money if it charged less in fares, and a lot of transit services could benefit from being less expensive. Does a public transit system making money really matter more than it providing affordable mobility? Public transit doesn't exist to make money in the same way that public schools don't exist to make money. And transit routes that bring in more fares than they cost to run aren't special beyond the fact that they're particularly efficient and important within their given network. These lines matter, but that doesn't mean that others do not. Thanks for watching.